Commander Vrethkin stood in the center of his private training chamber and watched the holographic display floating before his eyes. And what he saw made him laugh with deep amusement that echoed off the metal walls around him. The display showed a species called humans, and they looked absolutely pathetic to his warrior eyes. He was a Torvani, one of the most feared species in the entire galaxy, and he had good reason to feel superior to these strange new creatures from a small blue planet called Earth. Standing at 8 feet tall with scales as black as the void of space itself, Vrethkin was a living weapon of muscle and bone, an ancient warrior tradition. He had 4 powerful arms, each one capable of crushing stone, and his claws could tear through ship hulls if he wished. His eyes glowed with a fierce amber light, and when he smiled, rows of razor teeth gleamed in the chamber lights. For 15 years he had competed in the Galactic Crucible, the most prestigious combat tournament that existed anywhere in known space, and in all that time he had never once tasted defeat. Champions from 100 different worlds had challenged him, and every single one of them had fallen before his might. The Kathrani with their venomous fangs had tried and failed. The Velox with their 4 legs and incredible speed had tried and failed. Even the massive Grundar, beings of living rock who stood 12 feet tall, had crumbled before his superior technique and overwhelming power. Vrethkin was not just a champion, he was a legend, and legends did not lose to soft pink creatures who could not even grow proper scales. He swiped through the holographic display and examined more data about these humans. No natural armor of any kind protected their bodies. No claws grew from their fingers. No venom glands sat in their mouths. They were small, averaging only 5 to 6 feet in height, which meant the tallest of them would barely reach his chest. Their world had a gravity that was considered moderate by galactic standards, nothing impressive at all. They had no special abilities that the Galactic Assembly scientists could detect, no psychic powers, no enhanced senses beyond the ordinary. Pathetic, Vrethkin growled to himself, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. These humans had recently made contact with the wider galaxy, and now they wanted to join the Galactic Assembly, the great council of species that governed interstellar affairs. Every species that wished to join had to prove themselves worthy through various tests, and one of those tests was combat. A representative would face a champion in the Crucible, and while they did not need to win, they needed to show courage and skill. Vrethkin saw an opportunity here, one that made his warrior blood sing with anticipation. The Torvani Empire had been the dominant military power for 300 years, but lately other species had begun to question that dominance. Younger races were growing bold, talking of equality and shared power, and Vrethkin found this deeply insulting. What better way to remind the galaxy of Torvani supremacy than to utterly destroy the representative of this new species in front of billions of watching eyes? He would not just defeat the human, he would humiliate them so completely that no one would ever forget the lesson. The galaxy would remember that the Torvani were still the supreme warriors, and these soft humans would learn their proper place at the bottom of the hierarchy. Vrethkin closed the holographic display and walked to the communication terminal in the corner of his chamber. His clawed fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, and soon he was recording a formal message. "I am Commander Vrethkin, champion of the Galactic Crucible, blade of the Torvani Empire," he announced in his deep and powerful voice, "and I hereby issue a formal challenge to the human delegation." He paused for effect, letting his words carry the weight of his reputation. "Send your best warrior to face me in single combat, and let the galaxy witness what happens when weakness meets strength." He ended the recording and sent it to the human delegation's communication channels. Then he sat back and waited with a predator's patience. 3 days passed, 3 days in which Vrethkin trained harder than ever, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to be at his absolute peak when he crushed the human. He imagined how the fight would go. The human would enter the arena trembling with fear, Vrethkin would roar his challenge, and then with one or two swift blows it would all be over. The crowd would cheer, the Torvani would be honored, and the humans would slink back to their little blue planet with their tails between their legs. On the third day, the response finally came. Vrethkin opened the message with eager anticipation, expecting perhaps some desperate plea for mercy or a request for different terms. Instead, he found a simple acceptance, written in plain and direct language that surprised him with its lack of fear. The human delegation accepts Commander Vrethkin's challenge, the message read, and we will send our chosen representative to face him in the crucible. Vrethkin nodded with satisfaction. At least these humans had some courage, even if it was the foolish courage of creatures who did not understand what they faced. Then he read the final line of the message, and for just a moment, a very brief moment, something strange flickered through his mind. Our representative will be Maya Chen. The name meant nothing to him, held no weight or recognition, but something about the simple confidence of that message made him pause. He shook off the feeling immediately. It was ridiculous to feel anything but certainty about this fight. Maya Chen, whoever she was, would fall just like all the others had fallen. She was human, soft and small and weak, and he was Vrethkin, the undefeated champion. The outcome was already decided. The universe simply had not witnessed it yet. He stood and walked to the window of his chamber, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly into the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, on a ship traveling toward the crucible, a human female named Maya Chen was coming to meet her fate. Vrethkin smiled his terrible smile and felt only absolute confidence. He had no idea how wrong he was about everything. The transport ship called Horizon's Edge docked at Orbital Station Apex on a quiet morning, when most of the station's inhabitants were still sleeping in their quarters. Maya Chen stepped off the ship and took her first breath of recycled station air, and she found it strange and metallic compared to the fresh winds of Earth that she had grown up breathing. She was 26 years old, stood 5 feet and 6 inches tall, and weighed 130 pounds, which made her small even by human standards. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that kept it away from her face, and her dark eyes moved slowly across the docking bay, taking in every detail with quiet attention. She wore plain gray clothing, nothing fancy or impressive, just practical garments that allowed easy movement. To anyone watching, and there were many watching, she looked completely unremarkable. A group of Kathrani diplomats stood near the customs checkpoint, their serpentine bodies coiled as they observed the new arrival with obvious amusement. The Kathrani were known for their deadly venom and quick reflexes, and they considered themselves one of the premier warrior species in the galaxy. "That is the human champion," one of them hissed to his companions, his forked tongue flickering with what could only be described as mockery. "She looks like prey, not predator," another replied, and they all laughed together in their strange hissing way. Maya walked past them without a word, her expression calm and unbothered, and if she heard their insults she gave no sign of caring. Further into the station, a Velox merchant blocked her path, his 4 legs clicking against the metal floor as he approached. The Velox were fast creatures, capable of incredible bursts of speed, and they looked down on slower species with undisguised contempt. "Human," he said, his voice carrying a tone of false sympathy, "I sell funeral arrangements for many species, and I can offer you a very good price if you wish to plan ahead." He made a sound that was probably laughter among his kind. "Vrethkin has never lost, and he will not lose to something like you." Maya looked up at the merchant, and for just a moment something flickered in her dark eyes, something old and cold and patient. "Thank you for your concern," she said in a soft and polite voice, "but I will not need your services." She walked around him and continued on her way, leaving the merchant confused by her complete lack of fear. What none of these aliens understood, what they could not possibly understand, was what Maya Chen actually was. They saw her small size and assumed weakness. They saw her soft skin and assumed vulnerability. They saw her calm demeanor and assumed she was meek and passive. They were making the same mistake that countless enemies had made throughout human history. Maya had been fighting since she was 6 years old, when her father first took her to a small gym in Shanghai and taught her the basics of Sanda, the Chinese combat sport that combined punching and kicking and throwing. By the time she was 12, she had added Muay Thai to her training, learning to use her elbows and knees as devastating weapons. At 16, she began studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mastering the art of ground combat and joint locks. At 20, she discovered Krav Maga, the brutal and efficient fighting system developed by Israeli military forces. She had trained with masters from every corner of Earth, absorbing techniques from dozens of different martial arts, blending them together into something uniquely her own. But more than techniques, she had learned something far more important. She had learned how to read her opponents. As she walked through Orbital Station Apex, Maya was not just seeing the aliens around her. She was studying them, analyzing them, understanding them. She watched how the Kathrani moved and noted the limitations of their serpentine bodies. She observed the Velox and calculated the precise angles of their leg joints. She saw a Torvani guard standing at a checkpoint and measured his reach, his stance, his center of balance. Every species she encountered became data in her mind, weaknesses and strengths cataloged with the precision of a lifetime of combat study. This was what humans did. This was what made them dangerous. They watched, they learned, they adapted, and then they struck with everything they had. When Maya finally reached her assigned quarters, she found a message waiting for her on the room's communication terminal. It was from Vrethkin himself, a video recording that showed the massive Torvani flexing his forearms and baring his teeth in what was meant to be intimidation. "Little human," his voice rumbled from the speakers, "I have studied your species, and I have found nothing impressive at all." He laughed, a deep and rumbling sound that made the speakers vibrate. "You have no claws, no armor, no venom, nothing that makes a true warrior." His amber eyes burned with arrogant confidence. "When we meet in the crucible, I will show you and your entire species what real strength looks like." The message ended, and Maya stood in silence for a long moment. Then slowly, a small smile crossed her face. She walked to the window of her quarters and looked out at the stars, thinking about her home, about Earth, about everything her world had taught her. Vrethkin had studied humans and found nothing impressive. He had looked at their bodies and seen only weakness. But he had not studied their history, their wars, their endless capacity for violence and survival. He did not know about the battlefields of ancient China, where warriors had refined combat into an art form over thousands of years. He did not know about the fighting pits of Thailand, where Muay Thai had been forged in brutal competition. He did not know about the survival of the human species through ice ages and famines and predators, and countless wars against each other. Earth was not a gentle world. It was a world that demanded strength from everything that lived upon it. And humans had not just survived on Earth. They had conquered it, rising to the top of the food chain through sheer determination and adaptability. Vrethkin thought he was preparing to fight a weak creature from a soft world. He had no idea that he was about to face something far more dangerous than claws or venom or natural armor. He was about to face 10,000 years of human combat evolution, refined and perfected, and carried inside the small frame of Maya Chen. She turned away from the window and began her evening training routine. Tomorrow she would meet with the Crucible officials. In 3 days she would face Vrethkin in the arena. and the galaxy would learn what humans really were. She moved through her forms with fluid grace, each strike precise, each movement economical. The other species saw her as prey. They would soon discover their mistake. The Galactic Crucible Arena was a massive sphere of reinforced metal and energy shields, designed to contain the most violent combat the galaxy had ever witnessed. 40,000 spectators filled the seats that wrapped around the fighting floor, representatives from over 100 different species, all gathered to watch what they believed would be a historic humiliation. Cameras floated through the air, broadcasting the event to billions of viewers across known space, and the excitement in the arena was almost visible, a thick energy that made the air itself feel heavy. When Vrethkin entered through the eastern gate, the crowd exploded with sound. The Torvani champion strode into the arena with all the confidence of an undefeated warrior, his black scales gleaming under the bright lights, his 4 arms raised in triumph before the fight had even begun. He roared, a thunderous sound that shook the very walls of the arena, and the crowd roared back at him, feeding his ego with their adoration. He was a god of war, and everyone in that arena knew it. Then the western gate opened, and Maya Chen walked out into the light. The contrast could not have been more extreme. Where Vrethkin was massive and terrifying, Maya was small and quiet. Where he wore ceremonial armor that displayed his countless victories, she wore simple gray training clothes that bore no decoration at all. Where he roared and flexed and demanded attention, she simply walked to her position and stood there, waiting. A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd, and many spectators shook their heads in disbelief at what they were seeing. "This is the human champion," a Grundar spectator rumbled to his companion. "She is barely a morsel." The odds displayed on screens throughout the arena were so one-sided that most betting houses had stopped taking wagers. No one would bet on the human because the outcome seemed too obvious. Maya stood in the center of the arena and looked up at Vrethkin, who towered over her with his 8 feet of muscle and scale and arrogance. She did not flinch. She did not tremble. She simply looked at him with those calm, dark eyes and waited for the fight to begin. Vrethkin felt a flicker of irritation at her lack of fear. She should be terrified, she should be begging, but instead she just stood there like she was waiting for a bus. "Last chance, little human," he growled down at her. "Surrender now and I will make your defeat quick." Maya tilted her head slightly, as if considering his offer. "No thank you," she said in her soft voice. "I think I will stay." The horn sounded, deep and resonant, signaling the start of combat. Vrethkin charged. He moved with incredible speed for a creature of his size, all 4 arms reaching out to grab and crush his tiny opponent, his clawed feet tearing into the arena floor as he launched himself forward. This was his signature opening move, an overwhelming rush that had broken dozens of champions before they could even react. But Maya did not freeze like his other opponents had frozen. She moved. Not backward, not away from the danger, but forward and to the side at an angle that seemed to make no sense, until it suddenly made perfect sense. She slipped past his primary arms like water flowing around a stone, her body twisting in ways that should not have been possible, and then she struck. Her elbow drove into a spot beneath his second right arm, hitting a cluster of nerves that sent lightning bolts of pain shooting through his entire side. Before he could react, her knee found the gap in his hip plating, a spot he did not even know was vulnerable until agony exploded through his leg. Her palm struck his throat, not hard enough to kill but hard enough to make breathing suddenly very difficult. Vrethkin stumbled, genuinely surprised for the first time in 15 years of combat. He spun and swung all 4 arms in a wide arc, trying to catch the human with sheer reach and power, but she was already gone, having ducked beneath his attack and repositioned behind him. Another strike, this time to the back of his knee, and his leg buckled beneath him. He caught himself before he fell, rage now burning in his amber eyes, and he attacked again with renewed fury. The fight became a dance, though not the kind of dance anyone had expected. Vrethkin attacked with the strength of a species born for war, with techniques refined over generations of Torvani combat tradition, with the desperation of a champion who was beginning to understand that something was very wrong. Maya defended with the accumulated knowledge of 10,000 years of human warfare. When he threw a punch, she redirected it using the principles of Aikido, turning his own force against him. When he tried to grab her, she escaped using jiu-jitsu techniques designed for exactly this situation. When she countered, she struck with Muay Thai elbows that cracked against his scales, with Krav Maga attacks aimed at his eyes and throat and groin, with Wing Chun strikes that found pressure points his species did not know they had. She was not stronger than him. No human could match a Torvani in raw strength. She was not faster than him. His reflexes were sharper than any human's. But she was smarter than him, more adaptable than him, more ruthlessly efficient than him. Every movement she made had purpose. There was no wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. She had studied him for 3 days, watching recordings of his previous fights, analyzing his patterns and habits and weaknesses. She knew exactly what he would do before he did it, because humans had spent thousands of years learning to predict and exploit the movements of creatures larger and stronger than themselves. The crowd had gone silent, shock replacing their earlier mockery. On the arena floor, Vrethkin was breathing hard, purple blood dripping from a dozen small wounds, his confidence crumbling with every passing second. Maya stood before him, barely breathing hard at all, her gray clothes spotted with his blood but otherwise unmarked. She had not taken a single clean hit. "Yield," she said, her voice calm and clear. Vrethkin roared in defiance and charged one final time, putting everything he had into one desperate attack. Maya stepped to the side, grabbed his leading arm, and used his own momentum to throw him face first into the arena floor with a judo technique perfected over centuries. Before he could rise, her fist came down in a precise arc and struck his temple. The undefeated champion of the Galactic Crucible collapsed and did not move. Maya stood over his fallen form, looked up at the silent crowd, and bowed once with perfect respect. Then she turned to the medical staff, waiting at the edge of the arena. "He needs attention," she called to them. "Please help him quickly." She walked out of the arena without another word, leaving 40,000 spectators in stunned and absolute silence. The human had won, and she had made it look easy. Vrethkin opened his eyes and immediately regretted it. Light stabbed into his skull like needles made of fire, and he groaned with a pain that seemed to fill his entire body from head to toe. He tried to move and found that his limbs responded slowly, sluggishly, as if they belonged to someone else. Where was he? The ceiling above him was white and sterile, dotted with medical monitoring equipment that beeped and hummed in a rhythm he slowly recognized. He was in the medical wing of Orbital Station Apex, lying on a bed designed for Torvani patients, and 3 physicians of his own species stood nearby with expressions of deep concern on their scaled faces. "Commander," one of them said carefully, "please remain calm. You have sustained significant injuries." Vrethkin's mind felt foggy, confused, filled with fragments of memory that did not quite fit together. He remembered the arena, the crowd, the roaring of his name. He remembered the human, small and gray and impossibly calm. He remembered charging at her, with absolute certainty of victory. And then nothing. Just darkness. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice coming out as a croak instead of the powerful rumble he intended. The physicians exchanged glances with each other, clearly uncomfortable with the question they had been asked. "Commander," the lead physician began, "you have been unconscious for 6 hours." 6 hours? Vrethkin had never been knocked unconscious in his entire career, not once in 15 years of brutal combat. His head throbbed as he tried to sit up, and one of the physicians gently pushed him back down. "Your second right arm has suffered nerve damage," the physician continued, gesturing to the limb that was wrapped in a regeneration sling. "It will heal, but you need to rest. You also have 3 cracked ribs, a fractured kneecap, severe bruising to your throat, and a concussion." Another physician added, "These injuries are serious but not permanent." Vrethkin stared at them, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. He had been injured before, of course. Combat was dangerous even for a champion. But this list of wounds, this catalog of damage, how could all of this have happened? "The fight," he said slowly, forcing the words through his aching throat. "Who won the fight?" The silence that followed his question was the most terrible silence Vrethkin had ever experienced. It stretched on, filling the room with weight and meaning, and in that silence he found his answer. "Commander," the lead physician finally said, "the human female was victorious." Something cold settled in Vrethkin's chest, something that felt like the death of a part of himself. "How?" he whispered. The physician activated a holographic display, and footage from the fight began to play in the air above Vrethkin's bed. He watched himself charge with all his power and confidence. He watched the human slip past his arms like smoke through fingers. He watched her strike him again and again, each blow finding a weakness he did not know he had, each movement efficient and precise and devastatingly effective. He watched himself stumble and bleed and desperately try to catch her. He watched her throw him to the ground like he weighed nothing at all. He watched her fist connect with his temple, and he watched himself fall. The footage ended, and Vrethkin lay in stunned silence, his entire understanding of the universe crumbling around him. He was the greatest warrior in the galaxy. He had trained since childhood in 17 different martial forms. He had defeated champions from 100 different worlds. And this small human female had taken him apart like he was nothing, like he was a child pretending to be a fighter. "There is something else, Commander," one of the physicians said hesitantly. Vrethkin looked at him, wondering what else could possibly be said. "The human Maya Chen, she stopped the fight herself." "What do you mean?" Vrethkin asked, not understanding. "The fight was not called by the officials," the physician explained. "She knocked you unconscious, but then she stopped and told the officials that you had taken enough damage." He paused, seeming almost afraid to continue. "She asked for medical personnel to attend to you before she left the arena. She showed concern for your well-being. She showed you mercy, Commander." Mercy. The word echoed in Vrethkin's mind like a bell tolling in an empty temple. She had defeated him utterly and completely, had proven herself superior in every way that mattered, and then she had shown him mercy. She had not gloated or celebrated or demanded recognition. She had simply asked that someone take care of him and walked away. In Torvani culture, such an act would be considered the ultimate display of dominance, a statement that the defeated opponent was so far beneath the victor that they were not even worth finishing. But somehow, watching the footage again, Vrethkin did not think that was what the human had meant at all. There had been something in her eyes as she stood over his fallen body, something that looked almost like respect, almost like she regretted having to hurt him at all. "I wish to speak with her," Vrethkin said suddenly. The physicians looked at each other with surprise. "Commander, you need to rest. Your injuries are serious." "I need to understand," Vrethkin insisted. "I need to know what she is, what humans are, how this happened." He tried again to sit up, and this time the physicians did not stop him. Pain flared through his body, but he ignored it. Pain was an old friend, a familiar companion. "Please," he said, and the word felt strange in his mouth because Vrethkin had never asked for anything in his life, had only ever demanded, "Find Maya Chen and ask if she will speak with me." The lead physician studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I will send the request," he said, "but you must promise to remain in bed until you have healed enough to move safely." Vrethkin nodded his agreement, and the physician left to deliver the message. Alone now except for the beeping of medical equipment, Vrethkin closed his eyes and replayed the fight in his memory. Every move she had made, every strike she had landed, every weakness she had exploited. She had known exactly what to do before he did it. She had read him like a book written in simple language. She had been completely in control from the first moment to the last. And the most terrifying part, the part that Vrethkin could not stop thinking about, was that she had not seemed angry or hateful or even particularly intense. She had fought with calm focus, with quiet efficiency, like violence was simply another tool to be used when necessary. What kind of species produced warriors like that? What kind of world created beings who could dismantle a Torvani champion with such casual precision? Vrethkin had to know. He had to understand. Because if there were more humans like Maya Chen, then the galaxy was about to change in ways no one had anticipated. Maya Chen sat alone in the observation deck of Orbital Station Apex, watching ships drift past distant stars like fireflies moving through an endless darkness. It had been 3 days since the fight, and in those 3 days everything had changed. News of her victory had spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by broadcasts and messages and whispers that grew louder with each retelling. The human who defeated the undefeatable, they called her. The Earth girl who humbled the greatest warrior in known space. She did not feel like a hero. She felt tired and a little sad, though she could not quite explain why. The door behind her slid open with a soft hiss, and she heard the heavy footsteps of a large creature entering the room. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. Maya Chen, Vrethkin's deep voice rumbled through the quiet space. She turned and saw him standing in the doorway, 2 of his 4 arms still wrapped in healing bandages, his scales duller than they had been in the arena. He looked smaller somehow, not in body but in spirit, like something essential had been taken from him. "Commander Vrethkin," she replied, and she gestured to the seat beside her. "Please sit with me." He hesitated for a moment, and she understood the weight of that hesitation. In his culture, sitting with the one who had defeated you was an admission of something profound, an acknowledgement of their superiority. But he came and sat anyway, lowering himself carefully into a chair that creaked under his considerable weight. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They simply sat together and watched the stars, 2 warriors from opposite ends of the galaxy, sharing a silence that felt strangely comfortable. Finally, Vrethkin broke the quiet. "Why?" he asked, and that single word contained 1,000 questions. Maya considered how to answer, turning the question over in her mind like a stone in her hand. "Why did I fight?" she asked, "or why did I stop?" "Both," he said, "and more, I want to understand what you are, what humans are, how you could do what you did to me." Maya nodded slowly, gathering her thoughts. "Where I come from," she began, "we have a saying, the best victory is one where your enemy becomes your friend." Vrethkin made a sound that might have been disbelief. "On my world, the best victory is one where your enemy never rises again." "I know," Maya said, "and that is why your world has been at war for most of its history, while humans learned long ago that true strength is not about destruction." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "You asked what humans are, and the truth is we are survivors." She turned to look at him directly, and her dark eyes held depths that made him feel unexpectedly small. "Our world is not gentle, Commander. Earth is a place of storms and earthquakes and floods, of predators and plagues and endless competition for resources." She gestured at her own body, at the soft skin and small frame that had seemed so weak to him. "We have no natural weapons, no armor, nothing that should have allowed us to survive. and yet we did survive. How? Vrethkin asked, genuinely curious now. Because we learned, Maya said simply. We learned to work together, to think ahead, to adapt to any situation. She held up her hands, looking at her own fists. When we faced predators bigger and stronger than us, we did not grow claws. We invented spears and then bows and then guns. She touched her temple. Our weapon is up here, Commander. It always has been. Vrethkin was silent, processing this. And the fighting, he said. The way you moved, the way you knew exactly where to strike, that was learned as well. Maya nodded. Humans have been fighting each other for as long as we have existed. It is one of our greatest shames and also one of our greatest teachers. She looked back at the stars. Every culture on Earth developed its own martial arts, its own ways of turning the human body into a weapon, and those arts have been refined over thousands of years of warfare. She paused, and something sad flickered across her face. We have killed each other in numbers that would horrify most species in this galaxy. We have invented weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. We have waged wars that lasted generations. Then why, Vrethkin asked slowly, are you here seeking peace with the Galactic Assembly? Maya's expression softened, and something like hope entered her eyes. Because we finally learned, she said. We finally understood that all our fighting was only destroying us, that our true enemies were never each other but the challenges that threatened all of humanity. She turned to him again. We stopped fighting each other long enough to reach for the stars, and now here we are, wanting to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Vrethkin sat with this for a long moment. You did not come here to dominate, he said, and it was not a question. No, Maya confirmed. We came here to connect, to learn, to share, to grow together with other species. She smiled, a small and genuine expression. I did not fight you to prove that humans are superior, Commander. I fought you to show that we deserve a place at the table, that we are worthy of respect. And the mercy, Vrethkin asked, his voice rough, why stop when you had already won? Maya's smile grew a little wider. Because you were not my enemy, she said. You were just someone who did not understand us yet. She extended her hand toward him, palm up, fingers open. On Earth, this is how we greet those we wish to call friends. Vrethkin stared at her small hand for what felt like an eternity. In his mind, he saw the fight again, saw her precision and skill and devastating effectiveness. But he also saw her standing over his fallen body, asking for medical help instead of celebrating. He saw her sitting here now, offering friendship instead of demanding submission. Slowly, carefully, he reached out with one of his massive clawed hands and wrapped it gently around hers. Her grip was surprisingly firm. Perhaps, he said, and his voice was quiet now, almost thoughtful, the Torvani and the humans have much to learn from each other. Maya squeezed his hand once before releasing it. Perhaps we do, she agreed. They sat together in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars wheel past the observation window, two warriors who had found something unexpected in each other. And across the galaxy, in assembly halls and military academies and quiet homes on 1,000 different worlds, the story spread. They told of the Earth girl who defeated a legend and then offered him her hand. They told of humans, these strange soft creatures who fought like demons but dreamed of peace. They told of a galaxy that was about to change forever. The humans had arrived, and they were nothing like anyone expected. But perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. A species that could fight with everything they had and still choose mercy. A species that had mastered the art of war and then decided to reach for something better. A species called human, from a small blue world called Earth.